What would you do if your husband wrapped his hands around your throat at 5 months pregnant because a 28-year-old artist said you ruined her $2 million masterpiece? Tonight, you'll step into Madison Parker's world. Boston penthouse glam on the surface, a trap door beneath, one gallery opening, one banking alert, and a mistress whose smile is really a blueprint, deep fakes, forged signatures, a psychiatric ambush, and a baby named Hope fighting to live. In the next hour, you'll watch a 3-year con unfold in real time. Mercury in the coffee, shell companies in the shadows, and a secret worth $12 million that Madison never knew was hers. You'll meet the insider who should have protected her, the doctor who didn't, and the brother who refuses to let her fall. But here's the hook. The mistress never wanted the husband. She wanted Madison's life. And 7 years later, when the prison doors open, the past knocks with a lullaby. Clocks ticking. Notice every detail, because the clue you catch at minute 5 decides who walks out at minute 60 and whether Hope lives up to her name. Ready? Chapter 1 starts. Now, Madison Parker stood before the mirror in their Boston penthouse, adjusting the emerald necklace James had given her for their 5th anniversary. At 32, she still carried herself with the confidence of the MIT graduate who had once led a tech startup to a multi-million-dollar acquisition. But tonight, that confidence felt like a mask she was struggling to keep in place. "You look beautiful," James said from the doorway, his charcoal suit impeccable as always. At 35, he had the kind of sharp features that looked good in gallery lighting, something he was well aware of. Madison turned, her hand unconsciously moving to her stomach. She had taken the test that morning, had spent all day deciding when to tell him. "James, I have something." His phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and something flickered across his face. "Hold that thought, love. Victoria just arrived with the centerpiece for tonight's auction. This could make or break the gallery's reputation." Victoria Sterling. Even the name made Madison's chest tighten. The 28-year-old NFT artist had exploded onto the scene 6 months ago, right when James's gallery had been struggling. Her digital art sold for millions, and James had been desperate to feature her work. "Can it wait 5 minutes?" Madison asked. "5 minutes could cost us $2 million, James said, already heading for the door. "We'll talk after the opening. I promise." The gallery buzzed with Boston's elite, champagne glasses catching the light as they mingled beneath Victoria's digital installations. Madison watched from the corner as James and Victoria commanded the room's attention. Victoria's silver dress seemed to shimmer with its own light, her laugh carrying perfectly pitched to draw eyes. "Ladies and gentlemen," James announced, raising his glass, "tonight we make history. Victoria Sterling's digital Prometheus will be the first NFT piece to—" Madison's phone vibrated. A banking alert. She frowned, opening the app. Their joint savings account showed a withdrawal of $300,000. Today. She looked up at James, who was still speaking, his arm now casually draped around Victoria's shoulders as he gestured at the massive screen displaying her art. The room began to spin slightly. Madison gripped her champagne glass, still full, untouched. She couldn't drink it anyway. Not now. "Excuse me," she whispered to no one in particular, making her way to the bathroom. In the harsh fluorescent light, she pulled out the pregnancy test she'd been carrying all day. 2 lines. Still there. Still real. When she returned to the gallery, James was in deep conversation with Victoria, their heads bent close together over a tablet. Madison approached, catching the tail end of their conversation. "Handle the problem after the auction," Victoria was saying. "What problem?" Madison asked. They both looked up, and for a split second, Madison saw something in Victoria's eyes. Not surprise, calculation. "Technical issues with the blockchain verification," James said smoothly. "Nothing to worry about." But his phone was still on the table, screen up. Madison saw the text notification clearly. "She can't know about the mortgage yet. Too much at stake." Madison's blood ran cold. "What mortgage?" James's face went pale. "Madison, let's discuss this at home." "You mortgaged our house?" Her voice carried, and several guests turned to look. "Lower your voice," James hissed, grabbing her arm. His fingers pressed hard enough to hurt. "You're making a scene. Let go of me." "Madison's just feeling a bit overwhelmed," Victoria said loudly, smoothly, addressing the watching crowd with a concerned smile. The heat in here is rather much. James, why don't you take your wife home? I can handle the auction. The dismissal in her tone was clear. Your wife, like it was a disease. In the car, Madison's hands shook as she scrolled through their banking apps. The mortgage was real. Taken out a month ago using her forged signature. She was sure of it. The $300,000 had gone directly to Victoria's art production company. You forged my signature, she said quietly. I didn't forge anything. You signed it. You were probably just distracted, as usual. I would never. You've been so paranoid lately, James interrupted. First you accuse me of spending too much time at work. Then you claim Victoria is trying to steal me. Now this. Maybe you should see someone. This isn't healthy, especially not for the baby. Madison froze. I didn't tell you about the baby. James's hands tightened on the steering wheel. For a moment, neither spoke. Then he laughed, a sound like breaking glass. Victoria mentioned she saw you buying pregnancy tests yesterday. Congratulations to us, I suppose. But there was no joy in his voice. Only a kind of weary resignation that hurt worse than anger would have. That night, as James stayed at the gallery for the auction, Madison sat in their empty penthouse, staring at the bank statements. 3 mortgages, 7 credit cards she'd never opened, all in her name, all feeding into Victoria's accounts. She pulled up Victoria's Instagram. The latest post showed her and James at the gallery, his hand on her waist. The caption read, "Some partnerships are simply destined for greatness." Madison's phone rang, her brother Marcus, calling from overseas. Hey Maddie, how's the gallery opening going? She wanted to tell him everything. But what would she say? That her husband was destroying their life for a woman he'd known 6 months? That she was pregnant and terrified and possibly going crazy? It's fine, she lied. Everything's perfect. 3 days after the gallery opening, Madison discovered the full extent of the damage. She sat in her home office, once her sanctuary where she'd built her startup, surrounded by printed bank statements, credit reports, and legal documents. The morning sickness wasn't helping her concentrate, but what she saw made her nausea worse. $700,000 in debt, all accumulated in the past 6 months, all traced back to Victoria Sterling's various shell companies with names like Digital Renaissance LLC and Crypto Art Innovations. What are you doing? Madison jumped. James stood in the doorway, his expression unreadable. Understanding why we're bankrupt, she replied, holding up a statement. This credit card was opened 2 weeks ago. It's already maxed out at $50,000. I never authorized this. You're being paranoid again. He walked over and began gathering the papers. The gallery is an investment. Victoria's work is revolutionary. We're on the verge of something incredible. We're on the verge of losing everything. Madison stood, backing away as he reached for more documents. James, please. Look at what's happening. She's using you. His face darkened. She's the only one who believes in my vision. You gave up your career the moment you got comfortable with my success. Victoria understands ambition. The words stung because they held a grain of truth. Madison had closed her startup after the acquisition, had taken time off to support James's gallery dream, but that had been their plan together. I gave up my career to support yours. We agreed to a lot of things. That was before I realized I was suffocating. Madison's phone buzzed with a notification. Her trust fund, the one her grandmother had left her, the one that required 2 signatures to access, showed a withdrawal attempt. Blocked for now, but someone had tried. You tried to access my trust fund? James shrugged. We need capital for the next exhibition. It's marital property anyway. It's not. It's protected by the prenup you insisted on signing. Prenups can be challenged, he said casually, especially when one's spouse is mentally unstable. The threat hung in the air between them. Madison felt the room spin slightly, a combination of pregnancy hormones and pure fear. That afternoon, while James was at the gallery, Madison called 3 lawyers. 2 said they couldn't take the case. James had already contacted them, claiming his wife was having a psychotic break. The 3rd agreed to meet her, but seemed skeptical. Mrs. Parker, the lawyer said carefully, your husband has provided documentation of your recent erratic behavior, including security footage of you attempting to destroy valuable artwork? What footage? The lawyer turned his laptop around. Grainy security footage showed someone who looked like Madison attacking Victoria's digital display with what appeared to be a hammer. The timestamp was from 2 nights ago, when Madison had been at home, sick with morning sickness. "That's not me," Madison said, her voice hollow. "That's impossible." "Your husband also provided these." The lawyer produced printed screenshots of text messages, supposedly from Madison's phone, threatening Victoria. Messages Madison had never sent. She left the lawyer's office in a daze. On the street, she nearly collided with someone, a woman with red hair, wearing sunglasses. "Victoria." "Oh, Madison." Victoria's voice dripped with false concern. "James told me you've been struggling. I want you to know, if you need help, I know some excellent therapists who specialize in paranoid delusions." "Stay away from my husband," Victoria laughed. "Your husband?" "Sweetie, he hasn't been yours for months. You just haven't accepted it yet." She leaned in closer. "That baby you're carrying? James sees it as a burden. He told me so last night, in bed." Madison's hand moved instinctively to her stomach. "You're lying." "Am I?" "Check his phone. Look for the messages about solving the problem." "That problem is you, Madison. You and that baby." Victoria walked away, her heels clicking against the pavement. Madison stood frozen until her phone rang. Her credit card company. Someone was attempting a large purchase at an art supply store. By the time Madison got home, James was there with 2 other people, a man and a woman in professional attire. "Madison," James said, his voice gentle in a way that made her skin crawl. "These are doctors from Riverside Psychiatric. They're here to help." "I don't need psychiatric help. You attacked Victoria's artwork. You've been sending threatening messages. You're paranoid, seeing conspiracies everywhere." He turned to the doctors. "She's been like this since she found out she was pregnant. I'm worried about her and the baby." Madison backed toward the door, but James moved faster, blocking her exit. "This is for your own good," he said. "If you loved me at all," Madison said, her voice breaking, "you wouldn't do this." For just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Guilt, maybe, or just annoyance at the inconvenience. "If you go with them voluntarily," he said quietly, "just for an evaluation, I won't file for an emergency conservatorship. You'll keep access to your trust fund for the baby." It was blackmail, pure and simple, but Madison thought of the life growing inside her, of the resources she'd need to protect them both. "One evaluation," she agreed. "That's all." But she knew with terrifying certainty that James and Victoria wouldn't stop until they had destroyed her completely. The psychiatric evaluation at Riverside should have taken 3 hours. Madison had been there for 8. Dr. Brennan, the lead psychiatrist, kept asking the same questions in slightly different ways, as if trying to catch her in a lie. "Tell me again about the conspiracy you believe your husband is part of," he said, making notes on his tablet. "It's not a conspiracy," Madison insisted for the 5th time. "It's fraud. I have bank statements showing unauthorized withdrawals. I have proof that signatures were forged." "But you don't have these documents with you." "My husband took them from our home office. If you would just let me call my lawyer." "Ms. Parker, your husband mentioned you've been fixated on his business partner. Some might call it obsessive." Madison forced herself to stay calm. Any show of anger would be written down as aggressive behavior. She'd learned that in the first hour. "Victoria Sterling has received over $700,000 from accounts in my name. That's not obsession. That's theft." Her phone sitting on the doctor's desk lit up with a notification. Madison could see it from where she sat. Another credit card had just been opened in her name. "I need to call the fraud department," she said, reaching for the phone. Dr. Brennan pulled it away. "Let's focus on your evaluation first." 3 hours later, when they finally released her, Madison found James in the waiting room with a police officer. "Mrs. Parker," the officer said, "I need to ask you some questions about an incident at the Sterling Gallery last night." Madison's blood ran cold. "I was here last night. You know I was here." "The facility's records show you checked out at 9 p.m., the officer said. "The vandalism occurred at 10:30. "That's impossible. I was here until past midnight. Check with the night staff." "We did," James interrupted. "They said you left at 9. Madison looked at Dr. Brennan, who avoided her eyes. They'd altered the records. All of them were in on it. There's video footage, the officer continued, showing her his phone. The same grainy footage the lawyer had shown her, but with a new timestamp. This shows you destroying approximately $2 million worth of digital art equipment. That's not me. That's someone dressed like me. Test it. Height, weight, gait analysis. Mrs. Parker, are you suggesting someone impersonated you to frame you? The officer asked skeptically. Put like that, it sounded insane. Madison knew it. They knew it. And worse, they knew she knew it. Given her mental state, James said to the officer, I won't be pressing charges, but I am filing for a restraining order. For Victoria's safety. The trap was perfect. If Madison fought it, she looked unstable. If she didn't, she legally couldn't go near the gallery, couldn't investigate the fraud, couldn't gather evidence. That night, Madison stayed in a hotel room, afraid to go home. She used the hotel's computer to check her email and found dozens of messages. Screenshots were spreading on social media, apparently from her accounts, showing violent threats against Victoria. Her Instagram, which she hadn't touched in weeks, had posted disturbing content about destroying fake art and exposing the truth about digital fraud. Her phone rang. Marcus. Maddie, what the hell is going on? I'm seeing crazy stuff online. Are you okay? Marcus, I need help. James is... The line went dead. She tried calling back. Her phone service had been discontinued. The hotel room door clicked. Someone had just used a key card. Madison grabbed the lamp, her heart pounding. Victoria walked in, followed by James. How did you... I own the hotel, Victoria said simply. Well, technically you do. You signed the papers yesterday, remember? During your psychiatric evaluation? Madison's legs felt weak. I didn't sign anything. Digital signatures are so convenient, Victoria continued, especially when someone's under psychiatric supervision. The courts rarely question them. James stood by the door, not meeting Madison's eyes. James, Madison pleaded, the baby. Think about our baby. There is no baby, Victoria said. James had a vasectomy 2 years ago. Didn't tell you, did he? So whoever the father is, it's not him. Madison felt the floor drop out from under her. That's not possible. I never cheated? Victoria laughed. Tell that to the court. A pregnant woman whose husband is sterile doesn't make a very sympathetic victim. You're lying. James, tell her you're lying. But James's silence said everything. Here's what happens now, Victoria said, pulling out a tablet. You're going to sign these papers. Power of attorney, transfer of assets, and most importantly, a full confession that you've been embezzling from the gallery to fund your drug addiction. Drug addiction, The blood test from your psychiatric evaluation shows otherwise. Amazing what a little tampering can do. Victoria smiled. Sign or tomorrow morning you will be arrested for embezzlement, fraud, and destruction of property. While pregnant. I wonder how that will affect custody decisions. Madison's hands shook as she looked at the papers. Everything she'd built, everything she'd saved, would become Victoria's. Why, she asked James. What did I do to deserve this? Finally, he looked at her. You got boring, Madison. You stopped being the woman I married. Some moron, ambitious, driven. You became just another housewife waiting to get pregnant. You said you wanted a family. I wanted a partner. Victoria is giving me an empire. Madison signed the papers. What choice did she have? But as she handed them back, she made herself memorize every detail of Victoria's smug expression. This wasn't over. Smart choice, Victoria said. Oh, and Madison, the restraining order includes your doctor's office. You'll need to find a new obstetrician. Good luck explaining your psychiatric history to them. They left her there, in a hotel room she apparently owned but couldn't pay for, with no phone, no money, and no way to prove any of it had happened. Madison woke up on the floor of the hotel bathroom, blood on her thighs. The cramps had started at 3 a.m., violent and terrifying. She'd called the front desk, but they'd been instructed not to help her. Victoria's orders, though they hadn't said that directly. Now, at dawn, she managed to get herself to the emergency room using the last $20 in her wallet for an Uber. The driver kept glancing at her in the mirror, at the blood staining her dress, but said nothing. Threatened miscarriage, the ER doctor said after the ultrasound. The baby's heartbeat is still strong, but you need bed rest, complete rest. And prenatal vitamins, proper nutrition. Your blood work shows severe deficiencies. When did you last eat? Madison couldn't remember. 3 days? 4? The hotel had cut off her room service. Is there someone we can call? The nurse asked gently. My brother, Marcus Hayes, he's deployed, but we'll try to reach him through military channels. The nurse paused. Mrs. Parker, I have to ask. The bruises on your arms, is someone hurting you? Madison looked down at the fingerprint bruises James had left when he'd grabbed her at the gallery. It's complicated. It always is, the nurse said softly. There's a shelter. I need a lawyer, not a shelter, Madison struggled to sit up. Someone who won't be scared off by my husband's money. The nurse exchanged glances with the doctor. There's someone, she said finally. Detective Sarah Mitchell. She specializes in financial abuse cases. Her sister went through something similar. Detective Mitchell arrived 2 hours later, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and graying temples. She listened to Madison's story without interrupting, taking notes. The psychiatric evaluation is the problem, she said finally. It undermines everything else you might say. But the blood test, if we can prove it was tampered with, that's criminal. How do we prove it? We need the original sample, but first, we need to keep you and the baby safe. Mitchell handed her a card. This is a safe house address, not a shelter, a place for witnesses in financial crimes. Off the books. That evening, Madison found herself in a nondescript apartment in Southie, far from the gleaming towers of downtown Boston. The furniture was basic but clean. The refrigerator was stocked. For the first time in a week, she felt like she could breathe. Her phone, a burner Mitchell had given her, buzzed with a text from an unknown number. It was a video. Madison's heart stopped. The video showed her or someone who looked exactly like her in James's home office, taking money from a safe she didn't even know existed. The quality was perfect, not grainy like the gallery footage. This was professional. Another text. Deepfakes are incredible these days, aren't they? Madison called Mitchell immediately. She's making videos, deepfakes. They look completely real. Don't engage, don't respond. We're building a case, but it takes time. I might not have time, the baby. I know, I'm working on something. Your brother has been contacted. He's trying to get emergency leave. That night, Madison lay in the narrow bed, hand on her belly, feeling the baby move. Still alive. Still fighting. Her phone buzzed again. This time it was a news alert. Boston gallery owner's wife missing after psychiatric episode. The article, clearly planted, described her as unstable and potentially dangerous, suggesting she'd fled after embezzling hundreds of thousands from the gallery. James was quoted extensively, playing the concerned husband. I just want her to get help, he said, for her sake and the baby's. Victoria was quoted too, as the victim of Madison's obsessive jealousy. She'd even started a GoFundMe for artists affected by financial fraud, which had already raised $50,000. Madison threw the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall. The next morning, she woke to pounding on the door. Through the peephole, she saw 2 police officers. Madison Parker, we have a warrant for your arrest. She climbed out the back window, 3 stories up, her pregnant belly making every movement dangerous. The fire escape groaned under her weight. She could hear them breaking down the door above. She ran through the streets of Boston. No money, no phone, nowhere to go. The cramps started again. Worse this time. She collapsed in an alley, hidden behind a dumpster, blood pooling beneath her. A homeless veteran found her an hour later. His name was Tom, he said, and he'd been living on the streets for 3 years. Hospital, she gasped. They'll arrest you, he said. Heard it on the news. You're that gallery guy's wife. Please, the baby. Tom was quiet for a moment. Then, I know a place off the grid, doc, who helps people like us. The doc turned out to be a former EMT who'd lost her license for refusing to report undocumented immigrants. She worked out of a van treating the invisible people of Boston. "You're dilated 2 centimeters," she said after examining Madison. "This baby's trying to come early. You need a real hospital." "I can't." "Then you need a miracle." The miracle came 12 hours later in the form of Marcus Hayes, still in his Navy uniform, bursting into the warehouse where Tom had hidden Madison. "Maddie!" He knelt beside her, taking in her condition with horrified eyes. "What have they done to you?" "Marcus, the baby." "I know everything. Mitchell filled me in. We're getting you out of here. I have a medical transport waiting." "They'll arrest me." "No, they won't. I called in favors. You're being transferred to a military hospital as a dependent. Different jurisdiction. They can't touch you there." As the medics loaded her onto a stretcher, Madison gripped Marcus's hand. "Victoria has these videos. Deep fakes. They look real." Marcus's expression was grim. "Then we'll prove they're not. I've got a buddy in naval intelligence who specializes in detecting that stuff." The last thing Madison saw before the sedatives kicked in was James on the news, standing next to Victoria at a press conference, announcing their engagement. The headline scrolled across the bottom. "Gallery owner finds love after wife's breakdown." Victoria was wearing Madison's emerald necklace. Madison's daughter arrived 6 weeks early, screaming and fierce, all 3 pounds of her. The military hospital's NICU became Madison's world. The beeping monitors, the tiny incubator, the impossibly small fingers that gripped hers with surprising strength. "She's a fighter," the nurse said, "like her mom." Marcus had been by her side through 30 hours of labor, coaching her through contractions while Detective Mitchell worked to keep the arrest warrant at bay. "We have 48 hours, Mitchell had explained. "Military protection only goes so far. We need evidence, fast." Now, as Madison pumped breast milk in the harsh hospital light, Marcus worked on his laptop, his naval intelligence contact on speaker. "The deepfakes are sophisticated," the contact, Lieutenant Rivera said. "But there's digital fingerprints, pixel patterns that don't match reality. Give me 24 hours. "We don't have 24 hours, Marcus replied. Madison's phone, a new one Marcus had secured, lit up with a message from an unknown number. A photo of the NICU from outside the window. Her blood ran cold. "She knows where we are," Madison whispered. Another message. "Beautiful baby. Shame if CPS found out about mommy's drug problem." Mitchell grabbed the phone. "This is witness intimidation. We can use this." "It's from a burner phone," Marcus said. "Untraceable." "Not if we can catch her in the act." Mitchell pulled up something on her tablet. "Look at this. Victoria Sterling didn't exist before 2018. Before that, she was Rachel Winters. And before that, Jennifer Murphy." Madison leaned forward, studying the screen. 3 different women, but the same eyes, the same predatory smile. "Her first husband died in 2017, Mitchell continued. "Supposedly suicide. Left her everything. The second husband is in prison for embezzlement, crimes that started right after he married her." "She's done this before," Madison breathed. "At least twice, but here's the interesting part." Mitchell pulled up medical records. James has been exhibiting signs of mercury poisoning. Tremors, memory loss, paranoia. It's in his recent Gallery insurance medical exam. She's poisoning him? Slowly, my guess. She'll marry him, he'll die within a year, and she'll inherit everything, including what she stole from you. Madison felt sick. Despite everything, she didn't want James dead. "We have to warn him." "He won't believe you," Marcus said. "But he might believe this." He turned his laptop around. Security footage from a coffee shop near the Gallery, dated 3 weeks ago. Victoria adding something to James's coffee when he stepped away. "Where did you get this?" "Sometimes military intelligence cross-trains with local surveillance," Marcus said vaguely. "The point is, we have her." But before they could celebrate, the hospital room door opened. A woman in a suit walked in, followed by 2 police officers. "Mrs. Parker, I'm from Child Protective Services. We've received concerning information about your fitness as a mother." Madison's world tilted. "No, no, you can't take her. She's premature. She needs—" "The baby will remain in the hospital's care, but you need to come with us." Mitchell stepped forward. "This is harassment. Mrs. Parker is under protective—" I have a court order, the CPS worker interrupted, holding up papers, based on documented drug abuse and psychiatric instability. Marcus moved between them and Madison. Those documents are fabricated. We can prove it. Then prove it in court. Tomorrow, 10 a.m. The woman's expression softened slightly. The baby won't be moved, Mrs. Parker. You can see her during supervised visits, if you cooperate. Madison looked at her daughter through the incubator's plastic walls. So small, so vulnerable. I'll cooperate, she whispered. That night, in a holding cell, they hadn't arrested her technically, just secured her for evaluation. Madison heard familiar voices in the corridor. Told you she was unstable. James's voice slurred slightly. The mercury, Madison realized. Poor thing, Victoria cooed. Postpartum psychosis on top of everything else. That baby deserves better parents. Parents? James sounded confused. Well, once we're married, you've always wanted a child, haven't you? And this way, we don't have to ruin my figure. The pieces clicked into place. Victoria didn't just want the money, she wanted everything that had been Madison's. The husband, the baby, the life. Madison pressed herself against the bars. James, he appeared, looking haggard. His hands shook slightly, another symptom. She's poisoning you, Madison said urgently. Mercury, check your coffee, your food. She's done this before. Her name isn't even Victoria. James laughed bitterly. Still spinning stories even now? Gallery Insurance required a medical exam. You're showing signs of heavy metal poisoning. Look it up. Tremors, memory problems, paranoia. For just a second, doubt flickered in his eyes. His hand went unconsciously to his trembling fingers. Victoria appeared beside him, looping her arm through his. Come on, darling, the lawyers are waiting. As they walked away, Madison heard Victoria say, I made your special coffee, the one that helps with your headaches. James hesitated. Actually, I'm not thirsty. Don't be silly. You need to stay sharp for tomorrow. Madison couldn't see what happened next, but she heard James's response. I said no, Victoria. It was the first time Madison had heard him refuse her anything. Later, Marcus arrived with Mitchell and Lieutenant Rivera. We've got her, Rivera said simply. The deepfake technology she used has a signature. It matches videos used in the Jennifer Murphy identity. Same creator, same digital fingerprints. And, Mitchell added, Tom, the homeless veteran who helped you, he recorded everything on his phone, including James and Victoria discussing the frame job while you were bleeding in that alley. Madison's knees nearly buckled. Tom was recording? Old habit from his military days. Document everything. He's been following them for days, knew something was wrong. He's willing to testify. For the first time in weeks, Madison felt hope. The courtroom was packed. Madison sat at the defendant's table, trying to ignore the whispers from the gallery. She recognized some faces, neighbors, parents from the school where she'd once dreamed of enrolling her child, former colleagues from her startup days. Victoria had made sure everyone knew about the unstable wife who'd stolen from her own husband. James sat across the aisle, Victoria beside him in a conservative navy dress that made her look almost demure. The transformation was remarkable. Gone was the predatory artist, replaced by a concerned, supportive partner. Judge Harrison, a stern woman in her 60s, called the court to order. This is a custody hearing, she began, to determine the immediate welfare of baby girl Parker, born 6 weeks premature. The child's father has filed for emergency custody based on the mother's alleged instability and criminal behavior. Madison's lawyer, paid for by Marcus using his deployment savings, stood. Your Honor, we contest both paternity and ESA allegations against my client. A murmur ran through the courtroom. James's face darkened. Furthermore, the lawyer continued, we have evidence that Mrs. Parker has been the victim of an elaborate fraud perpetrated by Ms. Victoria Sterling, also known as Rachel Winters and Jennifer Murphy. Victoria's composure cracked for just a second. She whispered urgently to James's lawyer. Objection, James's lawyer called. Ms. Sterling is not on trial here. She is if she's the source of the false allegations, Madison's lawyer countered. Judge Harrison nodded. I'll allow it, within reason. Marcus was called first. Still in uniform, he cut an imposing figure as he testified about finding Madison bleeding and delirious, hidden by a homeless veteran. My sister built a successful tech company from nothing, he said. She's the strongest person I know. These accusations are not only false, they're impossible. The woman they're describing doesn't exist. The CPS worker testified next, but Mitchell had done her homework. Under cross-examination, the worker admitted that all her information came from a single source, Victoria Sterling, and that she'd never actually interviewed Madison before filing her report. Then came Tom, the homeless veteran. He looked uncomfortable in his borrowed suit, but his voice was steady. I followed them, he said simply. Mr. Parker and Miss Sterling. Something felt wrong about leaving that pregnant lady bleeding in an alley while they had champagne at the gallery. He pulled out his phone and Madison's lawyer connected it to the courtroom screen. The video was grainy, but the audio was clear. James's voice. Is she dead? Victoria's laugh. Not yet, but close enough. The baby probably won't survive. And if it does, no court will give it to a mother who abandoned it to live on the streets. I didn't sign up for murder, Victoria. You signed up for whatever it takes. Besides, you already tried to strangle her. Don't develop a conscience now. Gasps filled the courtroom. James shot to his feet. That's doctored. That's fake. But Lieutenant Rivera was already taking the stand. I've analyzed this recording using military-grade authentication software. It's genuine. No alterations, no edits. Moreover, he continued, pulling up files on the courtroom screen, I've identified 17 deepfake videos created using stolen footage of Mrs. Parker. The technology's signature matches videos created by someone named Jennifer Murphy in 2016, which were used to frame her husband for embezzlement. Victoria stood abruptly, heading for the door, but two officers blocked her path. Sit down, Ms. Sterling, Judge Harrison ordered coldly. The evidence kept coming. Mitchell presented bank records showing the money transfers, the forged signatures, the shell companies. The original blood sample from Madison's psychiatric evaluation, which Mitchell had managed to obtain, showed no drugs, while the reported results showed several. Someone switched the samples, Mitchell testified. That's a federal crime. Then came the most damaging evidence. Victoria's own laptop, seized that morning with a warrant. On it were the deep fake source files, the banking fraud documents, and something else. Searches for mercury poisoning symptoms, and how long before mercury kills. Your Honor, Madison's lawyer said, we request an immediate paternity test and a toxicology screen for Mr. Parker. James stood up, swaying slightly. This is ridiculous. I'm not taking any tests. Victoria, tell them. But Victoria was being handcuffed. You stupid man, she hissed at James, all pretense gone. You were supposed to be dead by now. The mercury should have worked faster. The courtroom erupted. James collapsed. Whether from shock or poisoning, Madison couldn't tell. Paramedics rushed in. Judge Harrison banged her gavel repeatedly. Order! Order! When quiet finally returned, she looked directly at Madison. Mrs. Parker, the court apologizes for what you have endured. All charges against you are dismissed. Custody of your daughter is granted to you immediately and unconditionally. Madison sobbed, Marcus's arms around her. Furthermore, the judge continued, looking at where Victoria sat in handcuffs, I'm recommending federal charges for fraud, attempted murder, and conspiracy. Bailiff, remove her. As Victoria was dragged past, she looked at Madison with pure hatred. This isn't over. Madison found her voice. Yes, it is. But even as she said it, she knew Victoria had one more card to play. 2 days after the trial, Madison sat in the NICU holding her daughter for the first time without supervision. The baby, who she'd named Hope, was still tiny but breathing on her own now. The nurses said she was ahead of schedule, a little fighter. Marcus sat beside her, scrolling through his phone. James is stable. They're treating him for mercury poisoning. He's lucky. Another month and it would have caused permanent brain damage. Madison felt nothing. Not sympathy, not satisfaction. Just emptiness, where her feelings for James used to be. He wants to see you, Marcus added carefully. No. He says he has information about Victoria. Something you need to know. Madison looked down at Hope, whose tiny fingers were wrapped around her thumb. Fine, but you stay with me. James looked smaller in the hospital bed, his designer stubble replaced by actual neglect, his hands still trembling from the mercury's effects. When Madison walked in, he couldn't meet her eyes. The paternity test, he said without preamble. I know what it'll show. Madison stayed silent. I had the vasectomy reversed 8 months ago, he continued. I wanted to surprise you. I knew how much you wanted a baby, but then Victoria came along and He stopped, swallowing hard. She made me believe things about you, about us. She had this way of twisting everything. She was poisoning you, Madison said flatly, literally and figuratively. The FBI found more. James pulled out his phone with shaking hands, showing her an email. She wasn't just after my money. She was after yours. Your grandmother's trust fund. It's worth $12 million, not the $2 million you were told. Madison's breath caught. What? Your parents hid it. They were afraid you'd be targeted for your money, so they created a false valuation. But Victoria found out. She has a connection at the bank. That's why she picked us. Not me. You. The room spun slightly. Madison gripped the door frame. There's more, James continued. She has a partner, someone who's been helping her all along, someone inside your family's financial management firm. Before Madison could respond, her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, but she recognized the writing style immediately. Victoria. Federal prison is temporary, but I have something permanent. Check your email. Madison's hand shook as she opened her email. A video file waited. She clicked play. It was her. Actually her, not a deep fake. In college, drunk at a party, in a compromising position with someone who wasn't James. She remembered that night, barely. She'd been drugged, anyway. She'd reported it to campus security but never pressed charges. How does she have this? Madison whispered. Another text. Amazing what people keep on old hard drives. Post the bail money or this goes viral. You have 1 hour. Marcus grabbed the phone. This is blackmail. We were calling you the FB. If that video gets out, you were drugged and assaulted, Marcus said firmly. You're the victim here. But Madison knew how the internet worked. Context didn't matter. The truth didn't matter. Once something was out there, it lived forever. Hope would grow up with this shadow over her mother's name. I need air, Madison said, walking quickly from the room. In the hospital corridor, she nearly collided with someone. A man in an expensive suit, perfectly styled gray hair, familiar eyes. Hello, Madison. She knew that voice. Richard Sterling, Victoria's father, or at least the man who'd been playing that role. Security, Madison called, but Richard held up his hands. I'm here to help, he said quickly. Victoria isn't my daughter. She's my former patient. Madison froze. Patient? I'm Dr. Richard Sterling. I treated Rachel Winters, her real name, 15 years ago at a psychiatric facility in Connecticut. She was 17, committed after poisoning her foster parents. Brilliant, sociopathic, and unfortunately very good at manipulation. Why are you telling me this? Because she's escalating. Each identity she creates is more elaborate. Each victim more carefully chosen. You weren't random, Madison. She's been planning this for 3 years. Ever since she found out about your trust fund. 3 years, but she only met James 6 months ago. She was your college roommate's girlfriend. Remember Jennifer? Madison's blood went cold. Jennifer, her freshman roommate, had dated someone for a few months. Someone Madison had barely paid attention to, dismissed as forgettable. But thinking back, those eyes. She's been watching you your entire adult life, Richard continued, learning your patterns, your vulnerabilities. She knew James was your weakness. She knew exactly how to turn him against you. The video from college. She was there. She probably orchestrated it. Richard pulled out a thick folder. This is everything. Her real history, her victims, her methods. The FBI will want this. Why help me now? Richard's professional composure cracked. Because 15 years ago, I thought I could fix her. I signed her release papers. Every person she's hurt since then is partially my responsibility. Madison's phone rang. Detective Mitchell. Madison, where are you? Victoria made bail. What? How? Someone posted 5 million in cryptocurrency. We're trying to trace it, but the lights in the hospital corridor went out. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting everything in red. Richard grabbed Madison's arm. She's here. From somewhere in the darkness, they heard whistling. A children's lullaby. Rockabye baby. Madison ran. The hospital's emergency lights painted everything in hellish red. Madison ran through corridors she'd memorized during Hope's first weeks of life. Richard Sterling behind her, both heading for the NICU. Code Silver. Code Silver. The intercom crackled. Armed intruder. Madison's only thought was Hope. Her baby was alone up there with just the nurses, vulnerable in her incubator. She burst through the NICU doors to find it empty except for the babies. No nurses, no security, just the sound of monitors beeping and Victoria Sterling standing over Hope's incubator. Don't touch her, Madison screamed. Victoria turned, smiling. She was holding a syringe. Insulin. Amazing how a little too much can look like natural infant death. Sudden, tragic, no one's fault. Please, Madison stepped forward slowly. Whatever you want, I'll give it to you. The trust fund, everything. Just don't hurt her. I don't want your money anymore. Victoria's mask of control was slipping, revealing something fractured underneath. You took everything from me, my plan, my future, my freedom. So now I take everything from you. Victoria, stop. Richard Sterling stepped into view. This isn't who you have to be. Victoria laughed, high and sharp. Dr. Sterling, my savior, tell me, did you ever report that you were sleeping with your 17-year-old patient? Or did you think I forgot? Richard's face went white. Madison looked between them, understanding dawning. He's not here to help you, Victoria continued, still holding the syringe near Hope's IV port. He's here to clean up his mess. Aren't you, Richard? Can't have your career destroyed now that you're about to make partner at the firm. The financial firm, Madison breathed. You're the inside connection. Richard pulled out a gun. I'm sorry, Madison. She was supposed to disappear with your money, not get caught. This was never supposed to happen. But before he could aim, Marcus appeared behind him, applying a sleeper hold that dropped Richard in seconds. Navy training had its advantages. Victoria used the distraction to grab Hope from the incubator. The baby cried, a sound that tore through Madison like a blade. Give me my daughter. Your daughter? Victoria held Hope against her chest, backing toward the window. This should have been mine. The baby, the husband, the life. I worked for it. I earned it. You just existed and got handed everything. You're right, Madison said, forcing calm into her voice. I was lucky, born into privilege. I didn't earn it. But neither did you earn the right to destroy lives. She took a step closer. Victoria backed up until she was against the window, 7 stories up. You won't kill a baby, Madison said. That's not who you are. You're a survivor, Victoria. Rachel, whatever your real name is, you survived foster care, psychiatric hospitals, Richard's abuse. You're not a baby killer. Something flickered in Victoria's eyes. For just a second, Madison saw not a monster, but a damaged girl who'd been failed by everyone supposed to protect her. My name was Rachel, Victoria whispered. I was 7 when my mother sold me for drug money. 12 when the first foster father. She stopped. It doesn't matter. It does matter. What happened to you matters. But this isn't the answer. Victoria looked down at Hope, who had stopped crying and was gazing up at her with unfocused newborn eyes. She's so small, Victoria said softly. Perfect. Unmarked by the world. Let me help you, Madison said. Real help. Not like Richard. We can get you actual treatment. Victoria laughed bitterly. Treatment? I've had treatment. Drugs that made me feel nothing. Therapy that blamed me for my own survival. Doctors who saw me as a case study. She looked at Richard's unconscious form with disgust. Then we find different help, better help. But first, give me hope. For a long moment, they stood frozen. Then sirens wailed outside. FBI and Boston PD surrounding the building. It's over, Marcus said gently. Rachel, it's over. Victoria looked at the window, then at Hope, then at Madison. You want to know the truth? Your husband never loved either of us. He loved the idea of us. You were the respectable wife. I was the dangerous mistress. We were just characters in his story. She was right, Madison realized. They'd both been victims of James's ego in different ways. Give me the baby, Madison said again. You don't have to be the villain in anyone's story anymore. Victoria kissed Hope's forehead gently, then handed her to Madison. The moment Hope was secure in her arms, Madison sobbed with relief. I really did poison my foster parents, Victoria said conversationally. They deserved it, but James didn't. He was just weak and vain. The perfect mark. She sat down on the floor, suddenly looking exhausted. I'm tired of running, of becoming new people, of the game. The NICU doors burst open. FBI agents flooded in, weapons drawn, and Detective Mitchell was with them. Hands where we can see them. Victoria raised her hands slowly. As they cuffed her, she looked at Madison one last time. Take care of her, she said, nodding at Hope. Don't let the world break her like it broke me. As they led Victoria away, Madison held Hope tighter, finally allowing herself to believe it was over. But there was still one more revelation to come. 6 months later, Madison sat in a law office in downtown Boston, Hope sleeping in a carrier beside her. The baby had not only survived, but thrived, hitting every milestone early. The doctors called it remarkable. Madison called it her miracle. Across from her sat James, his hands finally steady after months of treatment. The divorce had been finalized a month ago. He'd signed away all parental rights without a fight. Turned out he really had never wanted children. The vasectomy reversal had been Victoria's idea, part of her long game. I'm not here to apologize again, James said quietly. I know words mean nothing after what I did. Madison waited. She'd learned the power of silence in these past months. I'm here because my lawyer found something during the divorce proceedings. He pushed a folder across the desk. About your grandmother's trust. About your parents. Madison opened the folder, scanning the documents. Her breath caught. They're alive? For 20 years, Madison had believed her parents died in a car accident when she was 12. She'd been raised by her grandmother, who'd passed when Madison was in college. They faked their deaths, James explained. They were involved in corporate espionage. Your grandmother helped them disappear to protect you. The trust fund, the real one worth $12 million, was their payment for government secrets they sold. Madison's world tilted. My grandmother lied to me. My whole life is a lie. There's more. James pulled out another document. They've been watching you, protecting you in their way. 3 of Victoria's previous attempts to get close to you were thwarted by anonymous tips to authorities. Your parents were protecting you from predators drawn to the money. Where are they? Switzerland, they want to meet you. To explain. Madison looked at Hope, sleeping peacefully. Her daughter would grow up with truth, not lies. That much Madison could control. No, she said firmly. They made their choice 20 years ago. I'm making mine now. Or she stood to leave, but James caught her arm gently. Madison, I know I have no right to ask, but the gallery, Victoria destroyed it. I'm facing bankruptcy. Could you, Madison pulled free. You tried to have me committed. You strangled me while I was pregnant. You chose her over us. I was poisoned. You were poisoning me emotionally long before Victoria showed up. She just gave you permission to show who you really were. She left him there, gathering Hope's carrier. In the lobby, Marcus waited. How did it go? I'm an orphan by choice now, Madison said, and somehow that feels more honest than anything else in my life has been. They walked out into the Boston sunshine. Madison had reopened her tech consulting firm, working from home while caring for Hope. The trust fund, all $12 million, she'd put into a charitable foundation for victims of domestic abuse and financial fraud. Detective Mitchell called. Marcus said as they reached the car. Victoria was sentenced. Life without parole. Richard Sterling got 25 years. Madison felt nothing. No satisfaction, no relief, just emptiness where her capacity for caring about them used to be. That evening, she sat in her small apartment. She'd refused to take anything from the marriage except hope, working on her laptop while her daughter played in a bouncer. Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Hello, Madison. This is your mother. Madison's finger hovered over the end button. Please don't hang up. I know we don't deserve your time, but you need to know there are others. Other Victorias. Your father and I have been tracking them for years. The money draws them like blood draws sharks. Then they can have it, Madison said. I gave it all away. Silence. Then, you did what? I don't want your blood money. I don't want the lease it requires. I want my daughter to grow up knowing her mother earned everything honestly. Madison, you don't understand. Without protection, I have protection. It's called the truth. It's called living a life that doesn't attract predators. Goodbye, Mother. She hung up and blocked the number. Hope gurgled, reaching for her mother. Madison picked her up, dancing around the small living room. They had everything they needed: each other, truth, and freedom from the past. But as she would soon learn, some shadows follow you no matter how far you run. Madison stood at the podium in the congressional hearing room. 7-year-old Hope sitting in the gallery with Marcus. Her daughter had her mother's determination and her father's sharp features, though James had never met her and never would. Thank you for inviting me to testify, Madison began, her voice clear and strong. 7 years ago, I was nearly destroyed by a combination of deepfake technology, financial fraud, and institutional failure. Today, my company, True Shield Technologies, protects over 3 million women from similar digital abuse. The success had come faster than she'd expected. The combination of her MIT background and brutal personal experience had created a unique expertise. Truth Shield could detect deepfakes in real time, track financial fraud patterns, and provide legal resources to victims. Senator Williams leaned forward. Mrs. Parker, your story is compelling, but some argue your software invades privacy. With respect, Senator, being strangled by your husband while pregnant invades privacy. Having someone steal your life invades privacy. My software just levels the playing field. Applause rippled through the gallery. Madison caught Hope's proud smile. After the hearing, as they walked to the car, a woman approached. Madison's security, yes, she had security now, moved to intercept, but the woman held up her hands. Please, I just wanted to thank you. Your software saved my life. My ex was using deepfakes to destroy my custody case. It was the 100th such encounter this year. Each one reminded Madison why she'd built the company. That evening, back in Boston, Madison tucked Hope into bed in their brownstone, bought with honestly earned money from her company's success. Mommy, why did that lady cry when she hugged you? Madison smoothed her daughter's hair. Because sometimes when very bad things happen, it helps to know you are not alone. Like when Victoria tried to hurt us? Madison had told Hope age-appropriate truths about their past. No lies, no fairy tales, just carefully measured honesty. Yes, sweetheart. Like that. After Hope fell asleep, Madison went to her home office. An alert was flashing on her computer. The facial recognition system she'd installed, paranoid maybe, but earned paranoia, had detected something. A woman across the street watching the house. The face was different, but the eyes. Madison's blood ran cold. It couldn't be. Victoria was in Supermax prison in Colorado, life without parole. Her phone rang. Detective Mitchell, retired now but still a friend. Madison, I need you to stay calm. Victoria Sterling escaped during a prison transfer 3 hours ago. 2 guards are dead. Madison was already moving, grabbing the go bag she'd kept packed for 7 years. Old habits born from trauma. How? Inside help, someone with serious money and connections. We think. The lights went out. Madison heard Hope scream. She ran to her daughter's room, using her phone's flashlight. Hope's bed was empty. The window was open. A note lay on the pillow. You took 7 years from me. I'm taking everything from you. Come alone to the gallery where it all started, or she dies. You have 1 hour. V. Madison's hands shook as she called Marcus. Victoria has hope. I'm going to get her. No, Madison, it's a trap. Of course it's a trap, but she has my daughter. Madison grabbed something from her safe, something she'd hoped never to need. A gun, legally purchased, training completed. Another lesson learned from trauma. The gallery stood empty, years of abandonment evident in broken windows and graffiti. Madison entered through the front door, weapon drawn. Brave of you to come armed, Victoria's voice echoed from speakers. But you should know I have help. Your parents send their regards. Madison's parents stepped out from the shadows. Older, grayer, but unmistakable. Hello, darling, her mother said. We've been funding Victoria's legal appeals for years. She was useful for keeping other predators away from you. We didn't expect her to escape. Where is Hope? Safe, her father said. For now, you're going to transfer your company to us. We need it to launder our operations. Madison laughed, bitter and sharp. You think I care about the company? Take it. Just give me Hope. It's not that simple. Victoria appeared on the gallery's upper level, holding Hope's hand. The little girl looked drugged but conscious. I want more than your company. I want your life, your reputation, everything. Then take it, all of it. Victoria smiled. Oh, I will. But first you're going to confess to embezzlement, to fraud, to faking everything that happened to you. You're going to say you made it all up for attention. No one would believe that. They will when your parents confirm it, when the evidence we've manufactured surfaces. Victoria pulled Hope closer to the railing. Or your daughter has an accident. Madison looked at her parents. You would let her murder your granddaughter? Her mother shrugged. We never wanted you to have children. Complications we don't need. The betrayal cut deeper than anything James or Victoria had done. These were her parents. They were supposed to protect her. But Madison had learned something in 7 years of rebuilding. Sometimes salvation comes from unexpected places. Hope, she called out. Remember what we practiced? Hope, despite the drugs, managed a small nod. Then she did what Madison had taught her, went completely limp, dead weight. Victoria, surprised, loosened her grip for just a second. It was enough. The skylight shattered as Marcus and his tactical team rappelled in. FBI agents flooded through every entrance. Victoria tried to run, dragging Hope, but the little girl bit her hand hard. Another lesson from Mom about surviving. Madison didn't hesitate. She shot Victoria in the shoulder, dropping her. Non-fatal, but effective. As agents swarmed Victoria and her parents, Madison ran to Hope, gathering her daughter in her arms. You were so brave, baby. I remembered, Mommy. When someone tries to take you, you fight. Later, as dawn broke over Boston, Madison stood with Marcus and Hope outside the ruined gallery. Victoria was in custody, her parents arrested for money laundering and conspiracy. This time, there would be no escape. The evidence was overwhelming. It's really over, Marcus said. Madison looked at Hope, who was drawing on a tablet, her way of processing trauma, something the therapist had suggested. No, Madison said, it's just beginning. The real story, the one where we're not victims anymore. Hope held up her drawing. It showed 3 figures holding hands, herself, Madison, and Marcus, standing in sunshine. No shadows, no threats, just family. Can we go home now? Hope asked. Madison smiled, lifting her daughter. Yes, sweetheart, we can go home. As they walked away, Madison didn't look back at the gallery. The past had no power over them anymore. They had survived. They had won. And most importantly, they had each other. 2 years later, Madison stood before another congressional hearing. But this time, Hope sat beside her, 9 years old and fierce. My name is Hope Parker, her daughter said into the microphone. I'm here because bad people tried to hurt my mom and me using computers and lies, but my mom fought back. She made something to help other moms and kids. That's why I want to be like her when I grow up. The committee smiled. Madison squeezed Hope's hand. Truth Shield had gone global, protecting millions. Victoria would never leave prison. Madison's parents had been convicted. James had found redemption in volunteer work, though Madison never spoke to him. But none of that mattered as much as this moment. Her daughter, unafraid, speaking truth to power. The cycle of lies and manipulation had been broken. Hope would grow up in a world where truth had tools to fight back. And that was the greatest victory of all. If Madison's fight gripped you, if your heart dropped at the gallery and lifted in the NICU, help this story reach the next person who needs it. Tap, like, drop your boldest comment. Would you have signed in that hotel room? What clue did you catch first? Share this with a friend who loves high-stakes truth, and subscribe with the bell so you never miss the next real story of betrayal and redemption.